There will be no punishment for U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. That is the outcome of today's sentencing, announced by a judge in what has become known as the hush money case. Trump will not be jailed for covering up payments to an adult film star, despite being found guilty of doing so last year. The guilty verdict still stands, which means Trump will make history by becoming the first convicted felon to become U.S. president, that later this month.
In 10 days, he's back in the White House. But Friday was another day in court for Donald Trump. The president-elect chose not to attend this Manhattan courthouse in person, but instead appeared via video link for his sentencing. It was a historic case, the first time ever that a US president was put on trial in a criminal prosecution. The trial began in April 2024, despite then-candidate Trump rejecting it as a witch hunt.
This is a persecution like never before. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And again, it's a case that should have never been brought. It's an assault on America.
The case stemmed from alleged hush money payments made to adult film actress Stormy Daniels during Trump's 2016 campaign. Prosecutors said they were intended to cover up encounters which, if publicised, could have hurt Trump's election chances. Trump's former lawyer Michael Cohen was a star witness in the case. New York prosecutors argued Trump broke campaign finance laws by having Cohen conceal the payments through accounting tricks. After 2 days of deliberations, the jury unanimously found Trump guilty on all 34 counts. The verdict made him the first US president to be convicted on criminal charges, but he still managed to avoid jail.
Well, for more, I'm joined now by Richard Painter. He's a professor of corporate law, and he also served as the chief ethics lawyer for President George W. Bush. Mr. Painter, it's good to have you back on the program. Can you explain to our viewers why did Trump not get even a symbolic fine as punishment in this case?
The judge decided that imposing any penalty on Donald Trump could very well interfere with the performance of his duties as President of the United States. I don't think that's necessarily true. A fine would not have interfered with his official duties, neither would probation, if probation had involved supervision of the Trump Organization business operations and financial records, which was the core concern here that led to the criminal indictment and conviction. But the judge just wanted to be finished with it and gave Donald Trump the very unusual sentence of unconditional discharge, meaning nothing happens, but Donald Trump can and will appeal this conviction in the New York courts.
The judge also wished Mr. Trump Godspeed. And is it possible to assume that maybe the judge wanted to make sure that he's on Donald Trump's good side, knowing that this man is about to be U.S. president again?
Well, I think the judge wishes that whoever assumes the office of President of the United States has a successful presidency. That's in the interest of all Americans, including the judge here. I don't think this is a personal issue at all for the judge. Donald Trump was convicted of a crime, and the judge decided the best thing to do was simply sentence him to unconditional discharge and send him on his way to be President of the United States. The concern here is, of course, there are 3 other criminal indictments against Donald Trump that will never go to trial, or certainly not for the next 4 years, probably never, on much, much more serious charges. And the American people will never see resolution of those cases.
Mr. Painter, what do you make of what the judge said today? He said that the office of presidency basically shields Donald Trump from a harsher sentence. Does that mean that winning a presidential election gives you a get-out-of-jail-free card, like if you were playing Monopoly?
Well, essentially, yes. The Constitution does not say that, although if a court were to try to actually put a sitting president into jail, that would raise serious issues about interference with the president's duties and under the United States Constitution. But this was a case not likely to lead to jail time anyway. The judge could easily have sentenced him to probation and said that the Trump Organization needs to have supervision of its financial records in the future as a condition of probation. But the judge decided not to do that. Donald Trump might very well flouted the orders of the court if he were on probation, leading to a back and forth with the New York courts during his presidency. And the judge just didn't want to get involved with that. But there's nothing in the Constitution that says that a sitting president cannot be indicted while in office. I know the Justice Department takes the position that you can't indict a sitting president, but that's not in the Constitution, or that a sitting president could not be sentenced for a conviction in a criminal case. And anything short of sending the sitting president to prison would certainly, I think, be compatible with the performance of Article 2 duties of the presidency.
What message does this send to Americans, but also to the entire world when it comes to justice in the American system? I mean, we're told that everyone is equal in the eyes of the law, but doesn't this sentencing today show us that that's not the truth?
That is indeed not the truth. The president of the United States appears to be above the law in many respects, but I would not blame the proceeding today. There's nothing new that we've learned today. The U.S. Supreme Court this past summer decided that a president can never be criminally charged for official acts that he performs while in office. Now, this case had nothing to do with official acts, but the Supreme Court decision in Trump versus United States that made it clear that a president cannot be criminally charged if he orders the Justice Department to obstruct justice, if he commits other crimes in his official capacity, I think is a very dangerous decision. It set a very dangerous precedent for our country, does not reflect what's in the United States Constitution. The framers did not intend to have a president who is above the law.
Are you concerned what message is being sent to regarding the future Trump Justice Department? You're going to have a convicted felon who's about to become U.S. president who is, the boss of the Justice Department, and he can pick and choose who serves at his will. That doesn't bode well for American justice, does it?
I am very concerned about this situation. Not just with Donald Trump and the White House, but with a message coming from the United States Supreme Court this past summer that no president can be criminally charged for his official acts. And the Supreme Court specifically said that the president has control over the Justice Department and presumably cannot be criminally charged if he uses the Justice Department toward criminal ends in his official capacity. So whether or not Donald Trump did that in the past or would do that in the future, the Supreme Court of the United States has set a very dangerous precedent by giving the president carte blanche immunity for official acts in office. And this is how countries can become dictatorships. We saw what happened in South Korea when the president decides simply to declare martial law and try to use the army to keep himself in power. And I think it was a grave mistake, the U.S. Supreme Court, to say that a president has immunity from criminal prosecution for his official acts. That was a very dangerous decision this past summer.
Well, we will definitely be watching to see what happens over the next 4 years. We will have Donald Trump in the White House again. Mr. Painter, we appreciate your time and your valuable analysis tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, my next guest is Ronald Sullivan. He's a professor at Harvard Law School. He is among the most high-profile criminal defense lawyers in the United States. Mr. Sullivan, it's good to have you with us. The judge today said that the only lawful sentence that he could give without encroaching on the highest post in the land was an unconditional discharge. Do you agree?
I think I do agree. He is the president-elect, and it is not possible for a state to take the sitting president into custody or otherwise restrain his liberty. So I think this was the best and wisest solution for the judge in New York.
Does that tell us then that the president is above the law?
That's a tricky question. It's a great question, but it's a difficult question. So, a basic norm here in America is that no person is above the law. However, we do have a president of the United States. We do have a federalist system where states and the federal government work together, but there are some areas of authority where the other cannot encroach. What we avoid by this particular outcome is a constitutional crisis. I mean, one could imagine the state deputies from New York trying to arrest the president and in a standoff with the Secret Service. I think that's something nobody wants. So, to answer your question, is the president above the law? Not really. He's still convicted. He still has a felony on his record. And that's about the best that the state of New York can do given the circumstances.
But Mr. Sullivan, if I understand you correctly, then you're saying that if we did have a constitutional crisis, then and you've got a face-off between prosecutors or judges and the president-elect, then you would have a president-elect, i.e. Donald Trump, almost with the power of an emperor standing before you. And the Constitution should not be, am I understanding you right, should not be forced to weather that kind of storm.
Well, I mean, emperor would be a bit strong. If he were more akin to an emperor, then these charges would have been dismissed. So an unconditional discharge has to do only with the penalty stage of this criminal litigation. But the guilt phase is done, and there's a certain opprobrium associated with a finding of guilt that will forever be with Mr. Trump unless he prevails on appeal. So I wouldn't go as far as to say these are emperor-like powers, but I would say that there are values on each side, values that push in favor of the state enforcing its criminal law, and values that push in favor of the President of the United States being free to discharge his obligations under that office without the specter of criminal incarceration over him. So I think this is more of a balancing of values than evidence of emperor-like power with President-elect Trump.
At this time last year, Donald Trump was facing the prospect of 4 criminal trials that could have put him behind bars for years. I mean, what do you think happened? I mean, do you think that prosecutors handled the cases poorly?
Well, they certainly handled them too slowly. So all of the federal cases are dismissed at this point because the Justice Department has held the view for many, many years now, well before President-elect Trump took office, that you cannot prosecute a sitting president for many of the reasons that I've already suggested. So those cases took so long to charge that by the time he was indicted and went through the pre-trial process, essentially those prosecutors just ran out of time. And with Mr. Trump winning the election, that was the effective end to those prosecutions.
Okay. Ronald Sullivan, professor.
There's still one in Georgia, mind you, the state of Georgia. That's a state prosecution. That may or may not continue. The prosecutor there was disqualified from the case. So the next person may or may not continue that prosecution.
Okay, well, we will definitely be following that. Ronald Sullivan, professor at Harvard Law School. Professor, we appreciate your time and your analysis on this Friday. Thank you.
Thank you so much.